Week 29. Last week, I started squashing a lot of bugs that I discovered during my testing. And the more bugs that I squashed, the more seemed to emerge. Funny how things work, right? And I've come to a horrible realization that in my zeal to get the MVP ready in a state that can be published in closed beta alpha test, I took some shortcuts in some of my architectural design and the setup of the app. And of course, at the time, I thought it was a very smart decision to make. And now I think I'm realizing that the debt has to be paid with considerable interest. So in addition to bug squashing last week, I did a lot of refactoring and patching a lot of holes that were left wide open during the initial development phase. And one of the biggest things I'm actually still working on, the branch hasn't merged yet because the whole story, the fix, the patch is so big that it's probably going to take me multiple weeks to put in. What is it? I did not have a domain layer. When I first set up the app, I followed most of the helpful guidelines. For instance, I used MVI, right? I actually used a proper state management pattern for it. And that's the other thing. Like, I'm using a sort of a bespoke custom MVI that I set up using my code, as opposed to the MVI library that's now available, like Orbit, MVI, Kotlin. I think that's the other one, two of the biggest ones out there. So that's another area of improvement. Maybe I can use already made one as opposed to continuously refining the base models that I created as a result of the MVI. Anyway, in any case, so MVI, that's already in the app. So that's, thank God. And the other thing that I did was I wanted to stick to a clean architecture, but I used an abbreviated one. I omitted the domain layer. I thought to myself, hey, the business logic in my app is so simple, right? I don't need a domain layer. I can just put that, I just shove all of that into my view models. Who cares? If the view model is big, it is big. And, after the app is compiled, who cares, right? Nobody knows. Nobody can see it. It turns out that I do. So, not only does not having a domain layer cause an explosion of the view model size, but I also really didn't have a very robust state separation in terms of the layers. So the state of for instance, the repo operations and the business logic are scattered across both layers. And my view models, like the view model for my dashboard, has over 1,000 lines. It's making debugging really difficult, like really difficult. And even with AI's assistance, it's still not as straightforward because AI models, they get confused when you don't stick to a particular best practice, right? Because they're probably, I don't know exactly how they're trained, but if there is a very well-defined code base that humans can read, and that will actually make it easier for AI models to read as well. If your code base is a spaghetti code and it's very difficult to reason about, AI is going to find it difficult to reason about as well. So not only did it slow down my debugging, manual debugging, it's also making the AI models not really understand what's going on in the repo. So last week, there's some bug squashing. I started to put in the domain layer into this, and there is a horrible sort of realization that I'm having now, which is, if you didn't start with a nice foundation, a nice, strict, clean architecture foundation, and then you want to add a layer into an existing app, it's very icky. It's quite slow, right? Because what you essentially have to do is you have to take out the functionalities that should have been in the domain layer out of the app itself, because you're going to replace it with the domain layer. Problem is, of course, they're scattered everywhere, so you have to hunt them down, take them out, put them in a domain layer, and then put the domain layer back in correctly. And this actually takes a lot of time. So I have gotten to a point where I'm wondering if it is a good idea to restart the app architecture from the bottom. I haven't decided that yet, but it is tempting. Um, it like if I did that, it would probably mean throwing away a lot of the work that I did up until this moment. But then it might accelerate the development pace if I can actually put everything in place. I mean, I'm missing a lot of things. For instance, I don't have a staging environment, very much like my previous employer. So at this moment, it's not really a big deal because I can play around in the production environment because again, nobody's using the app for production, right? Once this app goes onto the market, and if I'm lucky enough to actually have users, I can't really play in the production environment. I have to have a staging environment, and I don't have that. I'd love to actually have that set up. The backend is not being source controlled very well. I mean, sure, I have some source control with regards to the database and the functions, but the database migration files are a bit of a mess at this moment. A lot of times when I apply new migration files, there's a lot of conflicts that I have to resolve, which is weird. I'm not a, by trade, I'm not a backend engineer, so I haven't really looked into that too deeply. But it'd be nice to actually start from fresh so that you can have a nice series, a history of all the migration files with proper naming conventions and all of that. So I don't have that, in the domain layer I needed to put in the domain layer. I've come to realize that perhaps Supabase real time is something that I shouldn't integrate in my app as opposed to just using polling with traditional vanilla Postgres. That means making considerable changes in the repository, in the data layer, and then propagating that to. So that's another thing that can be improved and stuff like that. And I don't have CI/CD for. I do have CI/CD for my app, for the UI, for the application, but I don't have CI/CD set up for my backend, which is just as important. So all those things, if I were to retrofit them, it might actually take longer. It's sort of like the wait and launch problem. What is that? That if you imagine if you're trying to send a spaceship to the next galaxy, right? And the spaceship today can fly this fast, right? And if you send it today, then the spaceship is going to fly this fast forever until it reaches the destination. And then you wonder, hey, what's the propulsion technology going to be like in the next 50 years, right? So let's say that if you, instead of sending your spaceship out today, you waited 50 years and then you send out the spaceship then, and at that time, the spaceship might fly this fast. Sure, you have lost the first 50 years of the travel time, but because your spaceship is so much faster, there's a chance that it can actually be faster than if you sent this spaceship today. So, but of course, it's not guaranteed because maybe the technological improvement is not significant enough over the next 50 years. The speed gain is not enough to sort of compensate for the time lost for not traveling. So that's the wait and launch problem. And I'm funnily enough, at this stage, I think I'm in that position because debugging and then retrofitting components will take longer. I know last week, if anything, has taught me that. But starting from beginning means throwing away 50 years of the flight time that I have already invested into this app. So I don't know. I think the goal for next week is to go through a little bit of the bootstrapping process of creating a new app with everything that needs to be in place, right? The entire infrastructure. Do it right. Buy it nicer, or buy it twice, right? So I'm going to try that next week and see how much time it's actually taking me, and then compare that to sort of the journey that I took over the last week trying to retrofit stuff and fix bugs. and hopefully in the next week I can make a decision as to, do I want to start fresh with a better foundation, or continue down the journey of fixing the app. Now, the good news is that fortunately, again, because this app is not being used by anybody at this point, I have the luxury of doing this. Once it does hit the market, I don't think I will. I mean, I know that some developers over time would release a big update, and at that point, like there's a lot of like they remove backwards compatibility, they create a completely new application and backend and stuff. Data won't transfer and stuff like that, and then you move on to the next, the new app. Some devs do that even after an app has been published. But I think at least not for a long time after it hits the market, I will not have the luxury of actually doing that. So maybe this is just what I need to do. Now that said, though, the alpha version is available, ready for testing, on a website, ready to be downloaded from Android, Google Play Store. So that like all the functionalities are there. There are bugs. There are bugs. Part of the reason why I'm doing this refactoring thing, but it works. Everything works. So, but maybe I can do it better with a more studious and fastidious approach. And hey, who knows? I'll give that a try next week. That's it for this week. I will see you next week.